Payday 2 Balance is back at it. Now, I need to preface this with the fact that this is a beta. Overkill is trying new things, and I commend them for that. However, there are some serious issues with this beta, and I have to talk about them. If you didn't know, an open beta was released for Payday for this weekend, in which there are quite a few changes. First, a lot of guns have had some stat changes, and second, a new damage drop-off system was added. And no, not the kind everyone has been asking for. This drop-off is for the player, not the enemies. Well, I'll get to that later. I want to take a gander at the weapon changes first, as there's some good and some bad here. Let's start from the top and go down. I'm not going to be talking about each weapon, as a lot of them were rebalanced, but I'll do each weapon class. A lot of the weapons play really similarly, so I don't feel the need to test each weapon individually. So let's just call the weapons I choose to be a representative sample. DMRs, I would say, are in a good place now. After the recent DMR buff, the AMR had 2 to 4 pickup, and the M308 had 3 to 5 pickup. The AMR was a stretch, but the M308 was clearly broken. Now, all the DMRs are 2 to 3. This is a great change, and realistically, all we needed from the start. You can play them accurately in single fire and be ammo efficient, while still being able to play them in full auto, going from Bulletstorm to Bulletstorm. The latter has always been my preference, and although not as Bulletstormy, it still works fine. Personally, I would have liked to keep the low pickup, and instead increase their damage to the 255 breakpoint. This would make it so you wouldn't need to run Berserker or Overkill Aced on them, which lets you have way more variety when it comes to builds. When combined with a medium pickup secondary, they would also have been efficient. Well, whatever, the DMRs are in a pretty good place now. I'll give you plus 5 points for that one. Battle rifles are the weird in-between of the 160 and 60 damage rifles. They did not need this buff since they had high enough pickup already, however it was a tad inconsistent. So this tweak makes them a little bit less random. Believe it or not, battle rifles already had the power of DMRs, but with better ammo even before this update. DMRs with Body Expertise Basic hit a 2-shot on heavies with some Zerk, and battle rifles do the same with Body Expertise Aced. While a little more costly, these were extremely powerful setups that barely anyone utilized. Like I said, this change is basically insignificant, but it's not terrible. Plus 1 point. Here's where things get interesting. LMGs have been in the meta for quite a while now. The reason for that was mainly their insane pickup, and the beta nerfed that. However, the LMGs received a buff in the form of different recoil. If you're thinking, what is recoil? I wouldn't blame you. Recoil is one of those hidden weapon stats in the game. If you want to see a lot of hidden stats, I suggest getting the More Weapon Stats mod by TDLQ. It's one of those mods that should be in the base game but isn't for some reason. This information is kind of important. Anyway, it works in tandem with stability, but the way it works doesn't matter too much. Just know that when firing a weapon, it flies in directions based on this recoil. The higher your stability, the less the recoil is felt. This recoil change is huge. For example, the KSP, which was already extremely easy to control at 2.3 and 3.2 horizontal and 0.5 and 1.8 vertical, was changed to 1.2 and 1.2 horizontal and 0.7 and 1.4 vertical. This makes the KSP effectively a laser beam. So this pickup change, which nerfs the LMGs, was packaged in with a huge buff. To see the effect of it in full force, I used the RPK. Personally, I really don't like this gun, but it has a unique quirk which I can use, and that is the fact that it can reach 0 stability. This means that the recoil of the gun would not be changed out of its initial value, as in not affected by the stability. This gun went from 2.8 and 3.9 horizontal and 0.6 and 2.2 vertical to 1.7 and 1.7 and 1.1 and 2.2. While that might just sound like a bunch of numbers to you, here's what it looks like in-game. Okay, jokes aside, as you can see, this is enormous. What purpose does less ammo pickup serve when the weapon is easier to control, making you miss less shots? On a side note, it seems the M60 pickup wasn't changed, so someone just sort of forgot about that one, I guess. This rebalance gets negative 3 points. Since we started talking about recoil, might as well go over the change to ARs. Oddly enough, only 2 guns were changed here, the AMR and the Tempest. I'm not complaining, since those are in the list of my favorite weapons, for totally not skin-related reasons, I swear. Now, I won't get into the numbers here like I did with LMGs. Odds are like 1% of people watching even understand what they mean, and 0% really care, so I won't go into it. I'll just say, wow, Overkill, overtuned it a bit, didn't you? Some of these clips I have are me pulling down on the weapon to instinctively fight the recoil, only to miss because there is no recoil. Seriously, these 2 guns are now on old Mark X recoil level. Speaking of, Mark X got some recoil added, but it's so minuscule that it's basically still the same laser beam it was. This isn't as terrible as the LMG buff, so -1 points is good enough. I don't really use pistols, so I'm not in the position to talk much about the fire rate increase, to be honest. If you like clicking faster, then I guess this beta is for you. Also, this seems like a new meta coming along to me. +1 points, I guess. I really like Akimbo SMGs. I use them a lot, and I use all of their damage tiers. Now, why do I say this? Because the Akimbo SMGs were among the most balanced weapons in the game. Trust me when I say this change was not needed. This is yet another way Overkill is seemingly trying to delete ammo bags from the game. Balance doesn't just revolve around weapons, it revolves around all gameplay elements. This includes skills, perks, and yes, deployables. Doctor bags are the undisputed meta due to that whole one down element, and Overkill is basically trying to remove all reasons to run ammo bags. That's the opposite of good balancing, and it's clear as day. The 40 and 60 tier of weapons were practically ammo efficient by themselves, with only the 100 tier being a point of argument. With a higher pool, you have a huge fallback to rebuild ammo, and it's ridiculously easy. On this Brooklyn 1010, I was trying to waste ammo to get my Bulletstorm, and I couldn't even make that happen. While this isn't game-breaking, this was not necessary, and even messes with other game balance. -2 points for this capacity increase. Finally, a shotgun nerf. Is what I would say if Overkill didn't do this completely back-asswards. Special ammo types had their range nerfed, but that was never the problem with shotguns. HE rounds were fine as is. Overused, sure, but they didn't really need a nerf. Slug rounds are meant to give a shotgun more accuracy and effect at a long range, so why are you nerfing it? Totally defeats the purpose, you know? The issue with Dragon's Breath was that it could be abused to stun half of the map. No one ever really used it for long range. Nerf the stun of it instead. That's the logical play. But this is Overkill, so who am I kidding here? Flechette is a thing that exists, I guess. Aside from the high damage shotguns that don't need buckshot for breakpoints, Flechette has never really had a use and still doesn't. The problem has always been buckshot. It's a straight damage up, so 90% of the shotguns used it. Overkill completely missed this point. -2 points for these changes. Oh boy. I don't even know where to start with you. First things first, Contractor damage buff was removed. Good. However, the Contractor, Grom, and Lebensauger got a fire rate increase. These fire rate increases are so ridiculous that they've basically become spammy, wall-piercing graze machines. But wait, there's more. These rifles also got recoil changes. Again, I won't get into the numbers, but just like LMGs, I had to give this a try with the Grom. Why? Because like the RPK, Grom reaches 0 stability. Look at this clip here. On screen, you can see an auto-clicker. This removes any human error, as it will mash the button as fast as its options will allow. Aside from holding right-click to zoom in, I did not touch my mouse at all. This has 0 stability, just a reminder. This basically can't miss, even with its 0 stability. Okay, do you agree with this statement? Sniper rifles should reward accuracy. Makes sense, right? They're sniper rifles, not AP assault rifles. Okay, so look at some of these clips and tell me how well my accuracy was rewarded.
I got the taser. A little help? Signal the driver. Got the medic.
Yeah. On top of that, Overkill sorta forgot to touch the range hitter, so it's now officially useless. When it was added, it was a solid side grade to the Contractor. Both could stand next to each other. Then the Contractor was buffed and it beat the range hitter in every way, but at least it competed with the other 170 damage sniper rifles. Now, the range hitter is completely insignificant in every way. Nice job, Overkill. -5 points to you. Yes, I gave this a category of its own. This gun finally makes sense now. It used to be a GL40 with a Car 4 DMR strapped onto the front of it, but now it's a solid DMR that has an underbarrel grenade launcher. The only real issue I have is that the total ammo of the underbarrel was nerfed for no real reason. The pickup of the underbarrel was lowered, and that's good enough. But this lower ammo pool means you can abuse longer bullet storms. For one reason or another, the underbarrel doesn't count towards the full ammo on the DMR, meaning instead of a max of 20 seconds of bullet storm, you can actually get 30. Again, this is not a huge change, but it's kind of pointless. That said, easily the best part of the beta. +7 points. Wow, this drop-off thing is pretty good. Just kidding, Lamau. Okay, remember that point system I had like 2 seconds ago? Throw it out the window and set it to -1,000. This is one of the worst things that were added into the game since I've started playing it. Let's get one thing out of the way first. Payday 2 is inherently a horde shooter. Whether the original design was this, or not, doesn't matter. That's just how it is now. Aside from sniper rifles, there's no practical way to keep fights at a range. 95% of combat in this game is in close quarters. Being able to control your range to enemies is inconsistent at best and impossible at worst. So what makes this optimal range system so bad that everyone is complaining about it? Well, to put it simply, it makes no fucking sense. A sniper rifle's optimal range is at a distance, I will agree on that. But in what world do they do less damage close up? This is my reaction to testing a close-range Thanatos for the first time. Why? The Thanatos only does half damage, until about 7 meters in my testing. Now, I'm not a gun expert, but I don't think a whopping 7 meters would do much to change the lethality of a bullet. This goes for all the weapons in the long-range category. The old system that made your bullets do less damage far away at least sort of made sense. To me, the most glaring issue with the system is how hard it benefits shotguns. Shotguns are already OP. Everyone knows this. They excel at close-range combat more than basically anything else. So who in the right minds would give shotguns an increase in damage close up? Yes, the long-range stuff was lowered, but remember, this game is inherently a close combat shooter. The only time something ends up out of a shotgun's range is basically just snipers, and people typically just bring a backup weapon for that anyway. So the system ends up just benefiting shotguns at close range, which is what they're doing most of the time anyway. Another major problem is the fact that you have no practical way of telling this range. Without a scope to show you the range you are at, you have to hope that you're in your weapon's effective range. Sure, the hit marker can give you an idea of your range, but since enemies spawn in groups, you're often just shooting towards a crowd, which is in the same range. I'm in the wrong range. So what? It's not useful to run away from the enemies just so you can turn around and shoot them. It's not useful to jump in head first just to shoot them either. In both of these cases, you're just going to shoot the enemies at the range you are at. Since enemies mow you down so fast on death sentence, there's no real way to avoid this. I found that even when I did notice I was at the wrong range for my weapon, there was nothing for me to do about it. When it comes to high-level gameplay, the more control the player has, the better. When I calculate my enemy breakpoints, I want to know how much damage I do. This whole drop-off thing will kill the entire concept of breakpoints, which is a huge part of build making. Well, that's basically all I have to say. Betas are made for player feedback, and there's mine. And speaking of feedback, what's up with that feedback form? Mainly these two categories. What purpose do they serve? Players with higher infamy have more sway or something? Do players like Savvy and Semper, who stay at Infamy 0 but are extremely skilled, have less sway than this guy? Infamy has never meant anything and never will mean anything, so why is it even here? In conclusion, this beta has some serious downsides that I hope never make it into the real game. Unfortunately, my 2,500 word review doesn't fit into the boxes, so I'll need to shorten it a bit. Thanks for sticking with my rant/review, and I hope it has given you an idea of how not to balance things. Maybe one day I'll make a video on how the game should be balanced, but until then, I can only pray that the balance doesn't get worse than it is.